I woke up to a miracle today. Triggers stay as I find my way. No judgment to lead astray. In this peaceful state I'll stay.
Welcome to this exploration of A Course in Miracles in Practice.
Today, we're getting into lesson 352, which is in that powerful What Am I section.
And it's such a crucial pivot point, I think.
It demands that we look at how our sense of our identity is built using judgment.
And then on the flip side, how peace reveals itself the instant we're willing to let that judgment go. We're focusing on identifying the root cause of conflict, shifting our attention completely away from the surface problems.
And away from the people we think are causing those problems.
So as you're listening, maybe think about those moments when you feel absolutely certain about a conclusion you've reached, about someone, or about a situation.
That feeling of being totally justified in a grievance.
Or that resistance you can feel when you even try to let a judgment go.
Because those moments of certainty, that stubborn resistance, that's the exact point where this lesson is meant to be applied.
It's an exercise in mental honesty, isn't it?
It is.
And if this exploration sparks any questions for you or reactions, maybe some experiences you want to share, please do reach out.
You can email us at ACIM@theworldharmonyproject.org.
And you can also find us on TikTok, where we share shorter reflections and insights.
Our handle there is @theworldharmonyproject.
Okay, let's just take a moment now to listen to the lesson in its entirety.
Lesson 352. Judgment and love are opposites. From one come all the sorrows of the world, but from the other comes the peace of God himself. Forgiveness looks on sinlessness alone and judges not. Through this I come to you. Judgment will bind my eyes and make me blind. Yet love, reflected in forgiveness here, reminds me, you have given me a way to find your peace again. I am redeemed when I elect to follow in this way. You have not left me comfortless. I have within me both the memory of you and one who leads me to it. Father, I would hear your voice and find your peace today, for I would love my own identity and find in it the memory of you.
That opening statement, it's just incredibly stark.
It is. There's no preamble, no easing into the idea.
No, it just lays down the law of the mind. Judgment and love are opposites.
And that single sentence right there, it establishes the entire framework for the discussion we're about to have.
The contrast is absolute.
From one come all the sorrows of the world, but from the other comes the peace of God himself.
We're talking about the ultimate source. It's not claiming that judgment causes some sorrow, or even most of it.
No, it says all the sorrows of the world come from judgment. All of them.
And that just refuses to treat surface symptoms, doesn't it?
It does. If the source of all sorrow is judgment, then every single uncomfortable feeling, every bit of anxiety, every conflict, every sense of loss,
it's all ultimately traceable not to an external event, but to an internal definition.
and if we can accept that premise, even for a moment, it completely reframes the kind of work we're doing here.
We're no longer focused on finding solutions to external circumstances.
Right. We're focused on changing the internal decision maker that uses those circumstances to generate a feeling of pain.
So when we talk about finding the peace of God, we're really talking about recognizing an internal state that stands in sharp contrast to that judgment-laden perception.
The perception that generates all conflict in the first place.
The moment you hear that all sorrow comes from judgment, you're forced to recognize that this is about the mind.
It's not about the external circumstances that we think need to be dealt with or managed or fixed.
We're being directed to look at the process, not the product.
And the most important process judgment engages in, it's not defining other people.
You know, it's defining us. Judgment's primary function is as an identity setter.
An external event, a word, a slight, a mistake, it so quickly translates into a conclusion about who I am.
Can you think about that flow for a second? I'm just existing, going about my day, and then an event occurs.
Maybe someone criticizes your work, or a driver cuts you off in traffic.
Or you make a noticeable error in front of people. The brain doesn't just register the action.
Not at all. It instantly asks, what does this mean about me?
And that instantaneous shift, that's the core mechanism of sorrow right there.
The mind decides, am I safe here? Am I being respected? Am I competent? Am I lovable?
If the answer is anything less than, yes, I am perfect and safe, then judgment has already occurred.
And that judgment is instantly accepted as a definition of the self.
These conclusions arrive so quickly they feel like a reflex.
They feel absolutely undeniably accurate.
If I feel shame, it must be because I am shameful. If I feel defensive, it must be because I am being attacked.
And the lesson is forcing us to pause and recognize that those immediate, powerful thoughts aren't about reality.
They are simply judgments about identity. They're conclusions drawn by a mind that's set on proving its own separateness.
We have to detail the cost of accepting that mental verdict, the deep-seated pain we experience, the sorrow this lesson identifies.
It comes not from what was said, but because we accept the judgment as a true description of myself or the other person.
The sorrow is generated by our acceptance of the assigned meaning. The external event is just noise.
The judgment is the meaning we apply to that noise.
So if someone says something cruel, the cruelty itself is an error in their mind, but the sorrow I feel.
It's caused by my decision to accept their error as a valid description of my worth.
And that acceptance is what sets the ego's protection into motion.
The moment I accept the judgment as true, I'm tasked with defending this fragile, limited self
Against a world that suddenly seems full of threats.
Let's try to ground this. The external event is simple, right? A car went into the wrong lane. An officer reacted with anger and rudeness.
But the mind doesn't process simple traffic control.
No, it processes identity.
The moment that rudeness hit, the mind didn't just register that officer is stressed.
No, it went straight to, that officer's treating me like I'm stupid. I must be stupid.
And that judgment is now affixed to my identity, whether I consciously realize it or not.
And what's the immediate consequence? A shift in behavior.
The identity is now the stupid person being yelled at.
So I start to behave like an upset, discombobulated person while trying to get out of the area.
You're confirming the very judgment the ego just accepted. The confusion, the panic, the inability to think clearly.
That is the immediate consequence of accepting the identity of the judged self.
And that immediately leads us to the ego's protection racket.
Because if I accept the premise that I am someone who can be treated like I'm stupid, then the core question, who am I really, has been answered by the ego.
And the ego confidently replies, I'm the one who can be diminished, threatened, or harmed.
And this situation, the yelling officer, the wrong turn, it proves it.
And that is the foundation of the ego identity. It's defined by its vulnerability.
So once we accept that core answer, the world transforms.
It stops being a neutral, innocent place.
It becomes a hostile environment where the fragile self, the identity built on fear and judgment, must be continually protected.
And every subsequent interaction, email, conversation, all becomes evidence.
Evidence that either supports or denies the ego's initial terrible story about who I am.
So the entire mind then gets locked into this desperate loop.
I'm either proving I'm stupid or I'm proving I'm not stupid. Even if I'm trying to prove I'm not stupid, I'm still reacting to the original judgment.
And this is where the lesson's metaphysical statement about blindness becomes so tangible.
Judgment will bind my eyes and make me blind.
If my mind is busy deciding what that event means about me, I literally stop seeing anything else.
When judgment binds our eyes, we just lose the ability to see innocence anywhere. The officer who was rude becomes the cruel officer, and I become the victimized driver.
Judgment insists on defining the error. It locks both parties into a rigid, non-negotiable assessment.
And that fixation consumes an enormous amount of mental energy.
The energy spent defending this judged self is so wasteful, it's counterproductive.
It's what keeps the sorrow of the world running.
And it's the lingering effect that really proves the point. The physical interaction with the officer ends.
But the mental hangover continues. The identity wound stays open.
I definitely remember times when that feeling of stupidity stayed with me and influenced the next few things I did.
That lingering effect, that need to recruit others into your defense mechanism, that's the proof that the identity judgment was accepted.
The mind, having accepted the verdict of stupid, immediately seeks to discharge that painful identity.
By projecting it onto someone else, making the officer wrong, or seeking external validation from a friend, no, you're not stupid. As long as I'm busy defending a judged self, I won't remember that there's another identity in me that doesn't need defending at all.
So the defensive maneuvering, the complaining, the justifying ensures that the focus remains on the conflict.
Which prevents any shift back to the peace that resides just beyond judgment.
The ego defines itself by what it is not and who it is against.
So if I stop defending the boundary, the ego fears it will just cease to exist.
And that is why letting go of judgment can feel so deeply unsettling.
It can feel like losing the self. Because the only self the ego knows is the one built entirely on grievance and comparison and self-assessment.
You might acknowledge intellectually, I don't want to be stupid, but immediately after that comes the resistance.
But I also don't want to be nothing.
We equate that constant mental noise, that constant defense, with being someone.
And that's the real discomfort of forgiveness, isn't it?
It is. It asks us to accept a moment of terrifying non-definition.
It asks us to surrender the rigid identity we've built on grievances and self-assessments, even the ones we hate.
Because even a hated identity feels safer than no identity at all.
This is the critical transition point in the lesson then, moving from judgment to the actual practice of forgiveness.
And the course definition of forgiveness is what allows us to navigate that discomfort, that fear of losing ourselves.
Worldly forgiveness is usually about condoning a behavior. It's like, I know you were wrong, but I'll let it slide.
Forgiveness is different. It's a radical shift in perception that leaves judgment completely behind.
The lesson gives us the key right here. It says, forgiveness looks on sinlessness alone and judges not.
This is an act of refusal. It's a disciplined choice to withhold identity assessment.
We refuse to decide our worth based on someone else's behavior or our own error, and we refuse to define their worth based on their error.
To look on sinlessness alone, it means recognizing that the error itself, the rude yelling, the wrong turn, is meaningless in terms of who we are.
The identity of both the person making the error and the person receiving it is completely taken out of the transaction.
The transaction is an interaction of bodies in space. It is not a definition of souls.
So if we return to the police officer example, applying this perspective changes the entire experience.
It removes the need for an internal defense.
With course forgiveness in operation, there's no compulsion to define the officer as wrong.
The choice is recognized immediately. I am choosing to accept judgment, which is an assessment of both people, or I am choosing to see beyond the judgment.
So in the case with the police, you wouldn't have felt compelled to make the office wrong because you'd remember that you are choosing to accept judgment, which is an assessment of both you and the other person.
The minute the mind recognizes that accepting the judgment defines both the self and the other person negatively, the appeal of that choice starts to dissolve.
And that realization is the moment the ego's story loses its power.
The mind is no longer using the moment to define its own vulnerability. It recognizes the fundamental choice that's available.
And this is the election mentioned in the lesson.
The lesson states, I am redeemed when I elect to follow in this way.
Redemption, then, isn't some reward granted far in the future after a long period of suffering.
No, it happens instantly, in the present moment. As soon as I make the choice, the election, to see past the judgment and recognize the sinlessness.
We often equate redemption with being rescued from a bad situation.
But here, it's revealed that redemption is merely the instant cancellation of the definition of the self as one who is vulnerable to attack.
And since the attack was only ever perceived in the mind, the choice to see beyond that perception instantly removes the sense of being attacked.
This choice clarifies the Course's consistent message. Suffering is entirely avoidable.
It's traced back specifically to the choice of judgment as a perceptual guide. When judgment is the guide, suffering follows. It's inevitable.
But when forgiveness is the guide, that willingness to look on sinlessness alone, then peace follows just as inevitably.
Which forces us to ask, if suffering is avoidable, why do we hold on to the choice for judgment so tightly?
It's because the ego has convinced us that judgment is necessary for self-preservation.
It teaches us that if we don't judge, we will be harmed, taken advantage of.
Or Maybe worst of all, we'll lose our sense of unique selfhood.
So we have to acknowledge that the willingness to elect forgiveness is a tremendous act of faith.
It requires abandoning the ego's entire framework for safety and identity.
We move from a transactional definition of self, I'm smart because I did well on that test, to a state of being that is independent of any transaction.
And this clarity, this immediate ability to choose, brings us to the final and I think very moving section of the lesson.
Where the text speaks about the comfort that we thought we had lost.
The line, "You have not left me comfortless," becomes so deeply meaningful when you view it through this lens of judgment.
The problem was never that help wasn't available or that peace wasn't present.
The problem was that we were actively listening to the wrong teacher.
The ego, the teacher of judgment, is constantly telling us we are alone, cut off, and in desperate need of external validation or defense.
And as long as we're stuck in that identity of the judge self, we actively block out the memory of God.
And we block the guidance that leads us back to peace.
When the mind's foundation is built on judgment, every subsequent emotion, separation, loneliness, abandonment, all feels utterly real.
We genuinely feel cut off from everything, including our own true identity and the source that created it.
Judgment creates the illusion of this chasm.
So when the lesson directs us to the solution, to listen for God's voice, it's really directing us to release the blockage,
Which is the attachment to judgment itself.
We aren't waiting for some external intervention. We're simply asking to stop listening to the internal voice of condemnation and fear.
And the prayer at the end just encapsulates this desire for perceptual shift perfectly.
Father, I would hear your voice and find your peace today, for I would love my own identity and find in it the memory of you.
To hear God's voice, it means experiencing perception without the ego's judgmental background noise.
The peace is already there. The voice is the clarity that confirms it.
It's the realization that we are not the conflicted, diminished selves that judgment describes.
We're being asked to accept ourselves as God created us, whole, safe, and innocent.
Not as the ever-changing, vulnerable, and flawed version that judgment concocts based on traffic incidents or career failures.
This gives us a simple, direct diagnostic tool for navigating the mind.
As soon as a negative thought about the self appears, I am not good enough, I am stupid, I deserve this, we instantly know it does not come from God.
By definition, it has to be a product of judgment.
And knowing the origin of that thought, that's the instantaneous ticket back to peace.
Knowing that the negative thought came from judgment allows an instant return to the identity we share with God, the sinlessness that requires no defense.
It allows us to recognize that we just made an error in interpretation and we can choose again.
What's particularly liberating here is the confirmation that external circumstances do not have to change.
Not at all. Peace can be recognized right now. The structure of the world can remain exactly as it is.
The officer can still yell, the street can still be blocked, the unexpected bill can still arrive.
The difference is that the story of what the event meant about us, that narrative of attack or failure or diminishment,
It never happened.
we elected not to write that story.
And that is the ultimate peace, isn't it? The realization that the peace we were seeking was never actually threatened by any external circumstance.
It was simply obscured by the internal process of judgment that we chose to accept as truth.
And once that choice is revoked, the peace is recognized as permanent.
And that, in essence, is the deep work of Lesson 352. It shifts the entire battleground from the world of events to the inner choice of the mind.
So, in summary, this exploration of Lesson 352 reminds us that all sorrow originates not from what happens, but from our internal acceptance of judgment as a descriptor of our identity.
We looked at how that judgment blinds us by forcing us to defend vulnerable ego self.
And we clarified that forgiveness, in the Course's definition, is the election to look on sinlessness alone.
It's an active refusal to use error, our own or others, to define worth.
And this choice is redemption itself. It instantly returns us to the peace that resides in our true identity, the one that never needed defense.
We encourage you, as you move through your day, to practice locating the origin of your discomfort.
Ask yourself, is this feeling caused by an event Or is it caused by the judgment I am placing upon that event?
And if you'd like to share any reflections or discuss how you apply this lesson, remember you can email us at acim@theworldharmonyproject.org.
You can also follow us on TikTok at the World Harmony Project.
Before we part ways, just allow the guiding thought of this lesson to resonate within you as an affirmation for today.
I choose to see without judgment today. I allow forgiveness to guide how I understand myself and others. In this choice, I recognize the peace that has never left me.